Greetings and salutations! How you doing? Thanks for hanging out with me for a while. In this video, we're going to ramble on a bit about the news from Microsoft this week that they have stuck a real Linux kernel inside Windows 10. A lot of people out there flipping out about this, don't quite understand what's going on. And while I have tried to stay away from political things on the channel as of late, this is big news and we need to talk about it because it is actually part of the Linux ecosystem. Some people say, don't talk about Microsoft, it doesn't have anything to do with Linux, concentrate on Linux. Well, if Microsoft's going to come along and put Linux kernels inside their operating system, I think I need to talk about it. So, before we get into the nuts and bolts of this thing, let me let you know straight up front that I do not like Microsoft. Make it perfectly clear. The reason why this channel has mostly Linux content on it is because I converted it to be a mostly Linux channel when I got so angry at Microsoft that I got rid of all of the Windows in my life and switched over to Linux 100%, and that's been about 4 or 5 years ago now. And since then, I have not looked back. My contact with Microsoft products has been very sporadic since then, and not on my own machines. So that's where I'm coming from when I talk about this. So Microsoft is loving Linux big time these days. And they have announced that they've put a new kernel in, but it is not that they are getting rid of the NT kernel and making Windows a Linux distribution. No, we're not there yet. What this is, it is the Windows subsystem for Linux 2, which has its own kernel. And I agree with Gardner the Linux Gamer that that's kind of a silly name for it. It should be the Linux subsystem for Windows, but we're dealing with Microsoft, so it's backwards. And when you think about it that way, it makes perfect sense, Gardner. Yes, it does. It is Microsoft. What is this all about? Well, a couple of years ago, Microsoft worked with Canonical to come up with a way to run Ubuntu within Windows. And the way it worked is this. You go into the Windows store and you look for Ubuntu and you click on it and it installs. And then you have an application that you can click on in the menu and it pops up and it's a Linux terminal. It's like Ubuntu running in a terminal. So it's a very basic Ubuntu install. It doesn't have a desktop. It's like Ubuntu server without the server stuff. Just a very basic install. And a lot of people at that time went, who would want that and why is that useful? Well, to a bunch of people out there in the IT world, this is very useful. I will give you an example. A good friend of mine got a job working for a company that had 100% of their infrastructure on Azure, which is a Microsoft product. It's a cloud service. It's virtual machines on somebody else's server. And not only that, there's a lot of infrastructure that you can use on Azure. It's the same thing that you can do with like AWS from Amazon and all these different cloud services, because nobody wants to actually maintain their own data center anymore. They don't want to have physical hardware. They want to rent the space because it's more flexible. That's the way it's going out there. And so this company had all of this stuff on Azure, and some of it was Ubuntu. They had a couple of Ubuntu servers they were running. So he's sitting at his corporate Windows 10 machine, and he's trying to get into these Ubuntu servers, and he first used a program called PuTTY, which is a program that lets you get into SSH from Windows. And that was a little wonky. So I went to him and I said, hey, did you know you could do this? You could install Ubuntu on your Windows 10. It's one click. He said, no. So I'm on the phone with him. He goes, he installs it. SSH is already baked into Ubuntu. The client is already there. All he had to do was type in the credentials, and he's hooked up to his servers. That's it. No big deal. It was done. And that's how he used it. So there are people out there who are having to deal with Azure and other Microsoft infrastructure, and maybe they're writing for scripts for PowerShell that are running on Azure and other Microsoft situations. And then you have those same folks who want to have Linux functionality. They want to be able to get into Linux servers. They want to use Linux development tools for whatever reason. So there you go. That's who this appeals to. And for those people, it gives them kind of the best of both worlds. So Microsoft has been, since that was released a couple of years ago, really working on this. They have open sourced a lot of their Windows software. There's a lot of Windows stuff that now runs on Linux, like SQL Server and many other applications that used to be Windows exclusive now will actually run on a Linux system. And they have been open sourcing bits and pieces of the Windows world. They have just released this new application they're calling the Windows Terminal app. And what this basically is, it's sort of like the old Windows console, which is the DOS prompt, and you can use PowerShell here, and you can use Bash, all at the same time, which is pretty amazing. Microsoft bought GitHub a while back, and since then they have been open sourcing a lot of their own code, and they've actually been a pretty good steward of GitHub. I know a lot of people were freaking out and going, well, Microsoft owns it, they're going to kill it. I've stayed on GitHub, and so has a lot of other projects, including Ubuntu and Linux Mint. So thus far, everything seems to be going just fine with GitHub. No problems whatsoever. And it seems that they are genuinely trying to change their ways. There are many of us out here who remember when Microsoft was the evil enemy of Linux, and that at some point Steve Ballmer had said Linux is cancer, should be eradicated. And then, of course, all of that came out about embrace, extend, and extinguish, and a lot of people are trying to put that into this and say that they're trying to embrace and extend Linux and then extinguish it. They can't do that. It's physically not possible for them to do that. There's no theoretical way for them to kill Linux, and we'll talk about that more at the end of the video, but people are freaking out nonetheless. I think that, and like I said, I am not a fan of Microsoft. I think that this gives me cautious optimism for the future for Linux, because what this does is it puts Linux tools in front of a lot of people, and it gives them a very easy way to get into working with Ubuntu or other distributions that are available that you can run inside these little virtual machines on Ubuntu. And this whole Linux Subsystem 2 means now there's going to be a lot more people who have access to Bash easily. They don't have to spin up an entire Linux system to do that. So it becomes like a gateway drug. They can get a taste of it, and if they really like it, it's definitely going to lead them into the real open source full Linux experience. So on that note, it's good. Now, we'll see how Microsoft does as things go on here. As long as this looks like it's profitable to them, they're going to continue down this path. The moment that they decide that it's not going to help them make money in some way or another, they're going to go the other direction. But one thing is certain, Microsoft does not want to be the same company that it has been in the past. They don't want to sell software because that is not a money-making thing. You have to support it. The support costs money. I don't think they really want to be the Windows 10 provider anymore either. I was talking to Jeremy O'Connell yesterday, and we were talking about this. He's a good friend of the Easy Linux project, works at CyberWeb Solutions, and you can check out CyberWeb Solutions just by going to the Easy Linux page. Go down at the bottom. There's a link on every page there because guess what? Jeremy's the one who engineered the entire Easy Linux page and EzeeTalk and all that stuff. Anyway, we were talking about this, and what he said was that what they really want to be is a software services company. They like Azure. Azure makes them money because you have to pay a yearly or monthly fee to use that service, and many companies do. And they would like to do that more in the consumer space, like Office 365, for instance. This seems to be a new way to go. They see that as a more attractive way to make money than maintaining and developing all of this software. So if they start working their way into the open source community, what they end up with is access to all of these tools. They don't have to develop it from the ground up. They can simply put it in their own system and then from that point on maintain it. Windows, even by Microsoft's admission, is a very huge, bloated system with a lot of technical debt. It's got a lot of old code in there. It requires a great deal of effort to keep it running. It's not easy to maintain. They don't do a great job of maintaining it because look at the October updates from last year that wiped out people's data. There's all kinds of things that come along that screw people up all the time. And they still, if you go by the published numbers, have 90% of the desktop share. So all of the laptops and desktops out there in the world, except for the 10% that are either running Chrome OS, Linux, or Mac, they are kind of responsible for. And I do mean that literally. They are responsible for it because Microsoft, with Windows 10, set themselves up to be a hyperuser on all of these systems. So if you're sitting in front of your Windows 10 machine now and you're watching this video and you think you're really slick and you're really cool because you have installed third-party software that supposedly turns off all the telemetry, you've turned off all the updates and everything, you might be thinking, I'm cool, I'm in charge of this system. No, you're not. Microsoft can still get into your system. They can still send updates down that will turn all of that off or break all that third-party software. And they reserve the right to do that. They have put that in the license, the EULA agreement that you have to agree to run Windows 10 when you install it or you buy a machine with Windows 10 installed on it and you initialize that system. They are doing that. And so it's a big drain on the company to have to maintain all of these systems. And I don't know, well, I am conjecturing here big time. I'm jumping out on a limb. All of this data that they're collecting from their users must not be making them enough money to make it worth it, because they certainly aren't investing back into Windows. They're not redeveloping it, and they've actually dumped the Windows department or the team within Microsoft itself. And now Windows, I think it's being administered under the Office 365 team. So it's not real high up on their list of priorities. They're just trying to keep the thing going. So the more that they can offset that responsibility of keeping that system going by bringing in other developers from the open source world, it probably would be in their favor if they could do that. At some point, I think that we are going to get a Windows system that is based on Linux. They dumped the development of their own browser. So they just said, okay, we're not going to develop our own engine anymore. And that's kind of, for those of us who've been around for a long time, that's mind-blowing, because Microsoft Explorer, the original browser that they got sued over because it was included in Windows, that was such a big deal from Microsoft for so many years. And now they got rid of that, and then they went to this Edge, and then they decided we don't really want to develop Edge that way anymore. And now they're bringing in the same engine that Chromium uses, the Chromium browser, which is what Google Chrome is based on, and Vivaldi is based on, and the Brave browser. There's a bunch of browsers out there that are based on that. So that's a big deal right there. They're using open source technology for their browser. They have seen the light. We don't have to reinvent everything. And while people in the Linux community constantly accuse the Linux community, within and without, of all of this parallel work and redundancy, because we have all these different desktops and different applications that do the same thing, the reality of the situation is, when you, let's take the desktop thing for instance. When you look from the top down, you are just a person who uses Linux, and then you are faced with the choice of using GNOME or KDE or whatever desktop it is that you want to choose. You may think, boy, that's a lot of duplication of effort. What do we got? We got Cinnamon, we've got Mate, we've got KDE, we've got GNOME, we've got XFCE, we've got just a ton of them out there, right? Pantheon, which is what Elementary OS uses. Pop! OS, which is kind of sort of their own desktop, even though it's based on GNOME. Well, when you look that from the top down, you think that's a lot of duplication of effort. If you start developing programs to run on Linux systems, and you start digging into the desktops to understand how the icons are displayed and where the launchers need to go so they'll become part of the menu when you install and all that stuff, you find out a little secret, and that is that all the Linux desktops are actually the same. They're all based on the same basic principles. Even though KDE and GNOME may look vastly different, the guts of the thing, they're pretty much the same. And so there really isn't as much of a duplication of effort there as you would think, because there's this cross-compatibility, and all parts of the Linux system are like that. What really makes Ubuntu different from OpenSUSE, different from Fedora? They have more in common than they have differences. And Microsoft is seeing this, and they're going, we could take advantage of this. We could be a part of that. So somewhere down the road, we may end up with a situation where Microsoft does exactly what Apple did when Steve Jobs came back to Apple after he was forced out of the company, and then he went and started his own company called Next, and then Apple fell on hard times, and they said, we need Steve Jobs back, and he came back in, and he straightened it out. Well, one of the things that he did was introduce Mac OS X, which completely threw out the old Mac architecture, and it became something new that was actually based on BSD Unix. Windows could do exactly the same thing. Mac OS is a Unix system with a big cap over it, and that cap is that Mac walled garden environment that we're all used to. Windows could be done exactly the same way. There's no technical reason why it couldn't. Yes, there's a lot of work ahead if you wanted to do that. It's not something that you could do in a week. But Microsoft would have the ability to do that and create a compatibility layer so where you could have a system that would run Windows applications, and rather old Windows applications. You can have a Windows application that's 10 or 15 years old, you can run it on Windows 10. I mean, they do have that backwards compatibility. Technically, you can do it on Linux too, but it becomes a little bit more difficult because of the way Linux is set up as far as shared libraries and things like that. If you can include the DLLs with your application on a Windows system, then you can get it to run. The architecture is still there. So they would be able to take that compatibility, put it over top of a Linux system, and then you would have this system that Microsoft only had to maintain certain chunks of it, and they could use that Linux kernel and just bring in whatever they need, just like Ubuntu does. Ubuntu does that. Ubuntu takes the mainline Linux kernel and they tweak it up a little bit and they put it in their Ubuntu system. Microsoft could do the same thing. So, yeah, they're looking at companies like Canonical that has 500 employees, and they are, Canonical is able to put out this really useful operating system, and then they're looking at their own bloated mess, which is Windows, and all of the technical debt and the old code, and they're going, okay, let's see what we can do here. So I would not be surprised if you didn't see more and more Linux showing up in Windows. And for those of you who are just absolutely Microsoft haters and you're afraid of it, and you think, well, they're going to take over Linux. This is embrace, extend, extinguish. They can't really do that. And the reason why is because Linux is an open source idea. For instance, if Ubuntu went away tomorrow, even though I'm a big Ubuntu user, that does not mean that I will stop using Linux. There's no way in the world. I will switch over to another system. It may be Debian. It might be OpenSUSE. It might be some other Linux distribution that doesn't exist yet. But I have somewhere to go. If you want to run a pure open source system, Linux is always going to be here for you. There will always be this community that supports it. And if you should choose to run that, then you will be supporting it by running it. Microsoft can't take that away from you. There's no way in the world they can. What they can do, though, is to bring that technology into Windows and make it more friendly and more mainstream. And we could be living in a world, maybe 10 years from now, where the operating system doesn't matter. And you could be sitting down in front of a computer that will happily run your 10-year-old Windows game, and it will also run the latest Linux software. That's the direction we're going. Instead of having these different walled-off systems that don't communicate with one another, instead of having developers having to develop for Windows, Mac, Linux, Android, iOS, whatever they want to run on, and have different versions for everything, we may be going toward a more cloud-based world where it doesn't matter, and the software, whatever local software that you actually put on your machines, is universal. It'll run everywhere. I mean, Linux has Wine. That allows you to run some Windows software already. But can you imagine what Microsoft could do with a Linux distribution? They would be able to build the ultimate Wine. It would be like everything would just be side by side working together. And the developers can do the same thing. That's what they're working on now. It's a very smart strategy. Let's get those developers used to the idea of having everything side by side, and then we can get the consumers maybe to be used to that. Or at least that's what I think might be going on. That's purely conjecture on my part. And I don't know, like I said, if Microsoft would, great. I'm glad that they're incorporating all this stuff. They're open sourcing. Now what Microsoft needs to do is stop spying on people and stop being a hyper user on every system that they put out there, because it's annoying as hell. And it drives people away from Microsoft. Every time that Microsoft sends down an update that breaks the system, what that does is it sends somebody else somewhere else, whether that be a Mac or over to Linux. That's fine with me. I want more people to use Linux. My attitude is the more people that use Linux, the better. So if Microsoft wants to incorporate Linux, that's fine with me too. Go right ahead. Have a good time. Make it happen. We'll see where it goes. We really will. It's going to be a very interesting next couple of years. And it's going to be interesting to see how this all lands. I'm very happy. I know that I'm in a very safe and secure place. I'm running my Ubuntu systems, and I think Canonical is going to be around for a long time providing that. And so I'm not really worried. But who knows? What do you think? That's the question. Yeah. What is your opinion? Your feedback is always welcome. You can check out Easy Linux on Facebook if you are a Facebook user. If you would like to join our forum, please do so. It's EzeeTalk. It's free, secure, and fun. It is not run by some mega corporation. It is not controlled by anybody but me and Jeremy O'Connell and a few moderators on the board there. So it's a very fun little community. We just crossed 1,000 members there, which is pretty cool. Thank you. Also, check out EasyLinux.com. That is sort of like the clearinghouse. It's where you can contact me through the contact page there. Probably that's the preferred method for contacting me. Also, you can see what new videos are out. You can check out what's going on the Facebook page without having to be part of Facebook. It's a fun place to be. So check out EasyLinux.com. We'll do it again. Soon. Maybe. Hopefully. Talk to you then.